In a bustling city, a mysterious ring ties the fate of a billionaire and a struggling little girl together. What secret does it hold? Stay tuned to witness a shocking revelation that changes everything. In the heart of the city stood a towering skyscraper that symbolized everything wealth and power represented: sleek, modern, and cold. At the top of this empire was Victor Reed, a billionaire entrepreneur who had built his fortune from the ground up. He lived alone in a sprawling penthouse with panoramic views of the city, a place that reflected his success but also his isolation. Despite his immense wealth, there was a visible emptiness in his eyes, a sadness that lingered whenever he looked out the window at the world below. Victor had everything one could dream of: money, fame, and power, but none of it filled the void he carried deep within. As successful as he was, Victor had suffered a personal tragedy many years ago, a loss that haunted him every day. The memory of his late wife, a woman he had loved dearly, was like a shadow that never left him. He had promised her before her passing that he would never remarry and would keep the family heirlooms safe. Yet, despite his promises, the pain of her loss never seemed to ease. Instead, he buried himself in his work, chasing wealth and recognition in an attempt to forget. But the more he achieved, the more alone he felt. Meanwhile, across town in a modest apartment, lived Lily Thompson, an 8-year-old girl who had known hardship far too young. Lily's father, Mark, had tragically passed away when she was just a baby, leaving her and her mother, Claire, to fend for themselves. They had no luxurious mansion, no expensive toys, or even a lavish lifestyle. What they had was a small home, a lot of love, and each other. Claire worked tirelessly to support Lily, but even with all her hard work, life remained a constant struggle. Lily had inherited her father's ring, a piece of jewelry that was more valuable for its sentimental value than its material worth. It had been passed down through generations in her family, and Lily cherished it, keeping it in a safe place. However, one day, as Claire was sorting through some of the old belongings, Lily noticed something that would change everything: a picture of a man wearing the very same ring that her father had once worn. The man in the photograph was none other than Victor Reed, the billionaire she had only seen on television. Intrigued and confused, Lily couldn't understand why this man had a ring that belonged to her father. It didn't make sense, and her curiosity soon turned into determination. She would find answers, no matter what it took. Lily's questions grew louder with each passing day, and despite her mother's reassurances, she could not let go of the mystery surrounding the ring. After all, it was the last tangible connection to her father, a man she never had the chance to know. Claire, noticing her daughter's growing fixation, decided to investigate further. She spent hours combing through old documents and photo albums, trying to make sense of Lily's findings. What she didn't know was that, in the depths of her research, she would uncover a connection far deeper and more complex than she ever imagined. In the meantime, Victor Reed continued with his routine, living his life in the sterile silence of his penthouse. Little did he know, a young girl's quest for answers would soon shatter his carefully constructed world. The billionaire's reclusive nature, once a means of protecting himself from the pain of his past, was about to be tested. What Victor had kept buried for years would soon be revealed, not by a business rival or the press, but by an innocent little girl. Lily, with her sharp eyes and boundless curiosity, found a way into Victor's world. Armed with the photo of her father and Victor, and a determination that only a child could have, she made her way to his office one rainy afternoon. She had done her research, learned about his charity work, and discovered where he was often seen in public. But what she hadn't anticipated was the sheer magnitude of the world she was stepping into. Victor's penthouse, with its glass walls and modern art, was everything she had imagined it would be: cold and unwelcoming. It was a far cry from her small apartment, but Lily was undeterred. As she stepped into the lobby, her small frame barely noticeable amidst the towering pillars and marble floors, she felt a sense of destiny guiding her. She had to ask the question. She had to know why Victor Reed possessed the ring that had once belonged to her father. Victor Reed was not a man easily shaken, but there was something about the little girl standing in front of him, clutching the old photograph, that stirred an unfamiliar sensation in him. He had seen children before, but this one was different. Her eyes, bright with innocence and determination, seemed to pierce through the stoic facade he had worked so hard to build over the years. The ring on his finger, a token of the past he had long since buried, suddenly felt like an anchor, pulling him toward a world he had long since tried to escape. Lily's question, simple and piercing, hung in the air. "Why do you have my daddy's ring?" she repeated, her voice unwavering, despite the overwhelming luxury surrounding her. The silence that followed was thick, laden with the weight of years of regret and unanswered questions. Victor's mind raced. His life had been filled with battles, both personal and professional, but none had prepared him for the confrontation now standing in front of him. The young girl's question cut through him like a blade, digging deep into wounds he thought had healed. Victor couldn't bring himself to answer immediately. His hand instinctively went to the ring on his finger, his thumb brushing over the intricate engraving. For a moment, his eyes softened, and the hardened exterior he had so carefully cultivated began to crack. He was trapped, caught between a past he had worked tirelessly to forget, and the reality of this small, innocent face demanding answers. He had to find a way out, but the more he looked at her, the more he realized there was no escape. The past would come for him, no matter how far he ran. As the days passed, Lily and her mother Claire remained a constant presence in Victor's life, whether he liked it or not. Despite his efforts to avoid confrontation, Lily's unrelenting curiosity pushed him further into a corner. The little girl showed up at his office time and time again, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence, to finally tell her why he had her father's ring. Claire, too, seemed increasingly intrigued by the ring and the memories it stirred. She began to suspect that the man she had long heard about in hushed whispers, the elusive billionaire, had a deeper connection to her late husband than she had ever imagined. One afternoon, while Lily played with a few of Victor's books in his private library, she stumbled across another photograph, one that made her heart race. In the image, Victor stood with a group of friends at an event, smiling with the same mischievous grin that Lily had seen in the picture of her father. There was no mistaking it. The man in the photograph was her father. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but now, the question wasn't just about the ring. She needed to know everything, but Victor, unaware of Lily's discovery, was battling his own ghosts. The more he thought about the question she had posed, the more it consumed him. The weight of his past and the secrets he had kept for so long were beginning to feel unbearable. For the first time in years, Victor was forced to confront the truth he had buried so deep inside. As the walls he had carefully built began to crumble, so too did his ability to keep running from the past. Lily's relentless pursuit of the truth began to gnaw at Victor in ways he couldn't ignore. She wasn't just a child asking innocent questions anymore. She was unraveling the very fabric of his carefully constructed life. One afternoon, as the golden light from the setting sun poured through the windows of his mansion, Victor found himself standing in front of the same bookshelf where Lily had discovered the photograph. His fingers traced the edges of a book he had not opened in years, a leather-bound journal filled with memories he had long tried to forget. Victor hadn't intended for this to happen. He had lived a life of wealth, power, and control, things that kept him distracted from the brokenness he carried inside. But now, standing in front of the child who shared a connection to that past, he couldn't help but feel the walls closing in around him. The ring he wore on his finger had once symbolized a bond of brotherhood, but now it felt like a chain, dragging him back to a time he had desperately tried to leave behind. Meanwhile, Claire, Lily's mother, had begun to suspect that Victor knew more than he was letting on. Her late husband's mysterious death had never fully been explained, and now Victor's presence in their lives, along with the peculiar connection to the ring, only deepened the mystery. Claire had seen the pain in Victor's eyes the few times they had spoken, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something crucial, a truth that, if revealed, could change everything. One evening, as the tension between them grew, Victor finally decided he could no longer run from the inevitable confrontation. Lily, with her soft yet determined voice, approached him once more. This time, her eyes weren't just filled with questions, they held a quiet understanding, as if she already knew the answer. She asked again, "Why do you have my daddy's ring?" But this time, her voice carried an unexpected. It wasn't just a child's innocent inquiry, it was the cry of someone seeking closure, someone yearning to understand a loss that had never truly been explained. Victor could no longer shield himself from the truth. The time had come to confront the past he had buried so deep. He led Lily and Claire to his study, the room that had been his sanctuary for so many years. The walls, adorned with expensive paintings and bookshelves full of leather-bound volumes, seemed to close in around them as he opened the drawer where he had kept the ring, a symbol of a life he had lost. With trembling hands, Victor removed the ring and placed it in front of Lily. The silence in the room was deafening as Victor, for the first time in years, allowed the truth to surface. "Your father and I were once close," he began, his voice strained. "But life is complicated. We both made mistakes, and I made a promise to him that I couldn't keep." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of Lily listened intently, her small hands clutching the ring tightly. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she could feel the raw emotion in his. Victor's gaze shifted to Claire, who stood silently beside her. She had always wondered about the truth behind her husband's death, but hearing it from Victor now made the puzzle pieces begin to fit together in a way that shook her to the. The weight of Victor's revelation lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Lily's innocent curiosity had chipped away at the fortress Victor had built around his past, exposing the raw truth of a time he had buried deep within himself. The once cold, impersonal mansion now felt like a prison, its silence amplifying the intensity of the moment. Victor stared at the ring in Lily's hand, feeling the undeniable sting of regret and guilt pierce through him. Claire, standing beside her daughter, was struggling to process everything. She had always suspected that there was more to her late husband's death than what she had been told, but hearing it from Victor was like reopening a wound that had never fully healed. As she looked at him, Claire's voice trembled with emotion, her eyes searching for answers. "So, you knew him, really knew him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor nodded, the memories flooding back in a relentless wave. He had been closer to Lily's father, Thomas, than anyone could have imagined. They had been partners in business, best friends, and for a time they had shared a bond that was stronger than blood. But Victor's ambition had led them down different paths, and eventually their relationship had fractured. He had left Thomas behind, unable to reconcile his desires with the friendship they had once shared. As the story began to unfold, Claire and Lily could sense the sorrow and regret in Victor's words. But it wasn't just about the past, it was about the present too. The unresolved grief, the mistakes, and the promises made to a man long gone were all brought to light in this moment of revelation. Victor, once a powerful billionaire, was now exposed as a man who had failed in ways he never thought he would. In the midst of this painful revelation, an unexpected event shook the foundations of their conversation. Lily, still holding her father's ring in her small hands, suddenly collapsed. The room was thrown into chaos as Claire rushed to her side, her heart racing with fear. Victor, stunned and overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation, quickly stepped forward to help. He had never been good with children, but seeing Lily's pale face and hearing her shallow breaths made him forget all of his previous reservations. Claire's voice cracked as she called for help, her emotions fraying at the edges. Lily, please wake up," she cried out, her hands trembling as she checked for signs of life. Panic set in as Victor watched Claire desperately try to revive her daughter. The ring, once a symbol of betrayal, now felt like a cruel reminder of the moment he had taken too long to face the truth. He had put all of his energy into avoiding the pain of the past, but now, in this critical moment, the consequences of his actions felt all too real. Victor's mind raced as he held Lily in his arms, his gaze flickering between Claire's distraught face and the child's fragile form. The world had stopped spinning for a moment. Everything except for Lily's condition seemed irrelevant. He could feel the weight of his previous choices pressing down on him, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to do everything he could to. He couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could start to make things. Victor was no longer the distant, cold billionaire who had once walked through his mansion with a sense of superiority. In this moment, holding Lily as she remained unconscious in his arms, he was a man who was fighting against the overwhelming guilt that had haunted him for years. His past with Thomas, the brotherhood they had shared, seemed like a distant memory now. He had let it all slip away for the sake of his empire that, in this moment, felt utterly mean. Claire, beside herself with worry, reached for her daughter, her face etched with fear and desperation. "Victor, please, what's happening? What's wrong?" The panic in her voice only deepened the tension in the room. But Victor, despite his internal turmoil, moved quickly to support Claire, rushing to make the necessary calls for medical. While they waited for the doctors, Victor couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led them here. His mind flashed to the years he had spent ignoring his own emotional pain, the walls he had built around himself, and the choices that had cost him. His relationship with Thomas had been a casualty of his drive for power, and now it felt as though he was being forced to confront every mistake he had. But there was something different now. With Lily in his arms and Claire standing beside him, Victor began to understand that redemption wasn't something he could buy or acquire with wealth. It was a journey, a process of rebuilding, of accepting the mistakes he had made and trying to make amends. In this moment, he wasn't just a billionaire. He was a man who had lost too much and was finally ready to fight for what truly mattered. The ambulance arrived with blaring sirens, cutting through the tension that had filled the mansion like a heavy fog. The doctors quickly took over, assessing Lily's condition, and Victor could feel a pang of guilt for not realizing sooner how much pain he had caused. It had taken this devastating moment, this brush with losing a life, to shake him awake from his self-imposed slumber. As Lily was rushed out of the room, Victor stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind reeling from the emotional confrontation. He had known for a long time that he couldn't keep running from the ghosts of his past, but now it was too late to ignore them. The realization that he had been living a life devoid of true connections had hit him like a ton of bricks. But Claire, despite the immense shock and fear she had just experienced, was different. She looked at Victor, her eyes not with anger, but with something unexpected, understanding. She could see the pain in his eyes, the remorse, and she knew in that moment that he wasn't the man he used to be. The walls he had built around himself were beginning to crumble. After what felt like an eternity, the doctors came out, their faces serious but not grim. They reassured Claire that Lily was going to be okay. A rush of relief flooded Victor's chest, but it was tempered by the realization that his journey of redemption had only just begun. He wasn't done facing his past, but now, for the first time, he felt like he had the strength to do so. Victor knew that, as long as he had the chance, he would make things right. He would find a way to honor the memory of Thomas, to make amends for the damage his ambition had caused, and most importantly, to ensure that Lily and Claire had a future where they didn't have to bear the weight of his past mistakes. As the tension eased, Victor looked at Claire, and for the first time he truly saw her. He understood, at that moment, that the bond they shared wasn't just about the past. It was about a future one that, for the first time in years, he was beginning to believe he could build. Victor stood in the quiet of the living room, staring out at the horizon. The mansion, which had once felt like a fortress of solitude, now felt like a place brimming with possibility. Lily had made a full recovery, much to everyone's relief. The weight of the fear that had consumed him just days ago had begun to lift, but the emotional toll was far from over. He had lost so much in his life: his brother, his connection to family, his ability to love without restraint, and now he was slowly learning to rebuild it all, piece by piece. Claire had been by his side every step of the way, offering him the same understanding and forgiveness that had been so difficult for him to accept. In return, Victor knew he had to change, and not just for her or Lily, but for himself. The days of being a man ruled solely by his ambition and pride were over. It was time to reclaim the life he had almost thrown away. Victor took the first steps by opening his heart to his past. He visited the memorial for Thomas, standing in front of the gravestone that carried his brother's name. The silence around him was almost unbearable, but it was a necessary moment. As he stood there, he realized that the bitterness he had carried for so many years had been weighing him down more than he had ever imagined. He could never undo the damage of the past, but in his heart, he vowed to do better, to be the man Thomas would have wanted him to be. Meanwhile, Claire found herself watching Victor change before her eyes. She had seen him as a man who had everything but understood nothing about love and sacrifice. Now, as she watched him take responsibility for his past mistakes and make genuine efforts to change, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope growing between them. There was a tenderness in the way he interacted with Lily now, a warmth that had been absent before. For the first time, Claire began to see the man Victor truly was, beneath the layers of wealth and emotional distance. His transformation was slow, but it was real. And with each small step, She could feel herself opening up to him again. As the weeks passed, Victor's transformation became evident not only in his personal life, but in his business dealings as well. He had made significant changes to how he ran his empire, shifting his focus from the accumulation of wealth to investing in social causes. He began funding projects that would make a difference in the lives of children, offering scholarships and financial support to those in Victor's newfound sense of purpose took root in every aspect of his life. He wasn't just throwing money at problems, she was personally involved, attending charity events, meeting with underprivileged families, and putting himself in positions where he could truly make an impact. His interactions with Claire and Lily deepened too. He spent more time at home, being present with them, learning how to be a father figure to Lily and, in turn, learning how to love. The mansion, once a place of emptiness and isolation, now felt like a home. Claire and Lily had become the center of Victor's world, and he cherished every moment. His old lonely habits were fading away, replaced by the comfort of genuine connection. The mansion, once a symbol of his distance from the world, was now a sanctuary filled with laughter, love, and new beginnings. Were still fresh, and though he was on the path to redemption, he knew that he couldn't change ever. But while Victor had begun to heal, there were still unresolved issues, the wounds of his past writhing overnight. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but he was ready to face them, no longer burdened by the guilt and shame that had once consumed him. Claire, too, had her own struggles. While she had opened her heart to Victor in ways she never thought possible, she still feared the weight of his past. She worried that, no matter how much he changed, the billionaire who had once been driven by ambition might resurface again. She was cautious but hopeful, taking each day as it came and allowing herself to believe in the possibility of a future together built on trust, love, and mutual respect. Victor's commitment to change was evident, but he knew that actions spoke louder than words. His relationship with Claire was still in the process of mending, but it was moving forward, and that gave him the strength to believe in a future that had once seemed impossible. His healing journey had only just begun, but for the first time, he was no longer walking it alone. As time went on, Victor found himself becoming more involved with the community. He began hosting gatherings at the mansion events, meant to foster a sense of unity and connection among the people he had once overlooked. Claire, who had always been passionate about charity work, took on a leadership role in organizing these events. The mansion, which had once felt cold and indifferent, now pulsed with the energy of shared purpose. Victor's relationship with Lily grew stronger as well. She had become an integral part of his life, and he had grown to love her as his own. It wasn't just about being a father to her. It was about forming a bond that transcended bloodlines. He had come to realize that family wasn't always about shared genocide, was about the people who cared for you, who supported you when you were at your lowest, and who loved you unconditionally. Claire, too, had found herself rediscovering parts of her heart she had long buried. The emotional walls she had built over the years were slowly crumbling. She saw in Victor a man trying to atone for his mistakes, but more importantly, she saw a man who was truly invested in their future. She had to let go of her fears, allow herself to believe in his transformation, and embrace the possibility of something beautiful growing between them. One evening, as the sun set behind the mansion, Victor and Claire stood together on the balcony, watching the glow of the fading daylight. The sound of laughter and conversation echoed from inside the house, a stark contrast to the silence that had once surrounded them. For the first time in years, Victor felt at peace. He had no illusions about the road ahead, but he was no longer afraid of it. His past had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. He was learning to build something better, something worth holding on to. As he looked at Claire, he saw the woman who had helped him rediscover hope. He knew that their journey was just beginning, and this time, he wasn't walking it alone. As the season shifted and time continued its relentless march, the changes in Victor's life became more pronounced. His commitment to charity had transformed him into a philanthropist with a heart for the underprivileged. He continued to fund education initiatives, health programs, and children's welfare projects, gaining the respect of the community and business world alike. His wealth, once seen as a symbol of power, now represented opportunity to give back, to make amends for the wrongs of his past, and to create a better future for those who had once been invisible to him. Claire, too, had found her own path. She had been hesitant at first, unsure if she could trust Victor's change, but now she saw that he wasn't just a man making amends for the past. He was a man forging a new path on that they could walk together. She had come to realize that Victor wasn't the same man he had been when they first met. The lessons he had learned through his pain and growth had shaped him into someone more capable of love, more capable of being the partner she had always hoped for. Their relationship, still in the delicate stages of healing, had grown stronger with each passing day. They learned to communicate better, to listen to each other's needs, and to give space for growth. Victor was no longer the man driven solely by his ambitions, and Claire was no longer a woman fearful of being let down. Together, they had learned to embrace the beauty of imperfection, the strength of vulnerability, and the promise of a future that wasn't defined by past mistakes but by the decisions they made each day to build something lasting. Lily, now a part of Victor's life in every sense, thrived in the home that had once felt foreign to her. She had become not just a child Victor cared for, but a daughter he was proud to call his own. The bond they had formed was irreplaceable, and with each passing day, Victor's commitment to being the father she deserved grew stronger. And so, with time, healing, and effort, they all learned that love wasn't just something that happened overnight. It took patience, it took courage, and most of all, it took a willingness to confront the darkest parts of themselves and emerge on the other side, ready to start anew. The mansion, once an empty, imposing structure, had become a homey place where love, growth, and the hope of a better future could finally take root. As the months passed, the mansion underwent a transformation both physically and emotionally. It was no longer a place of cold walls and haunting memories, but rather a home brimming with life, love, and laughter. The grand hallways, once echoing with silence, now echoed with the sound of conversations, celebrations, and the footsteps of a family reunited. Victor had turned the mansion into a symbol of renewal, a reflection of his own journey from darkness to light. Victor and Claire's relationship had grown into a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Claire no longer saw Victor through the lens of his past mistakes, but through the lens of the man he had become. She had learned to see the warmth in his eyes, the sincerity in his actions, and the tenderness with which he treated Lily. No longer burdened by the weight of his past, Victor had come to embrace a future full of possibility, a future he wanted to share with Claire and Lily. Victor and Claire's joint efforts in the charity sector had yielded remarkable results. The education programs they had funded had flourished, and the foundation they had established for underprivileged children continued to thrive. They had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of giving, of kindness, and of understanding. The true value of wealth was not measured in money, but in the lives touched by generosity. Victor had come to understand that happiness wasn't something you could buy. It wasn't about the size of a mansion or the number of zeros on a page. It was about the people you loved, the lives you impacted, and the peace you felt when you knew you had done everything you could to make the world a better. He had found peace in his heart, not because he had achieved success, but because he had learned to live for others, to put their needs before his, and to be content in the knowledge that he was doing something meaningful. One warm evening, as the sun began to set, Victor, Claire, and Lily sat together on the balcony overlooking the sprawling grounds of the estate. The sky was painted with hues of orange and pink, and the air carried the soft rustling of leaves from the nearby tree. It was a perfect moment, one that captured everything they had fought for: the peace, the love, and the new life they had built. Lily, now an older and more confident girl, smiled brightly as she watched the sunset, her hand resting comfortably in Victor. Claire leaned in closer to Victor, her eyes filled with warmth and gratitude. For the first time in a long while, they were all content in the present, knowing that they had faced their pasts and had come through stronger. Victor's thoughts drifted to the difficult days, the days when he had felt lost, when the mansion had seemed like a prison of memories he couldn't escape. But now, in the glow of the present, he realized that those days had shaped him into the man he was today. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he had the love of his family, the trust of those who believed in him, and the satisfaction of knowing that he had made a difference in the lives of. It was in this moment, surrounded by the people he loved, that Victor finally understood the true meaning of success. It wasn't about wealth or status, it was about the connections you made and the legacy you left behind. And for Victor, his legacy would not be one defined by his fortune, but by the family he had found, the love he had given, and the lives he had. As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Victor took a deep breath. feeling the peace of the moment wash over. He had come so far, and he knew that with Claire and Lily by his side, there was nothing he couldn't overcome.